Thank you for tuning in for today's live stream PEEC and Los Alamos Mountaineers program. Good evening and thank you for joining us. Tonight's program is hybrid. Before we get started, I want to make sure everyone is aware that this presentation is being recorded. I am Ashley Lusher, the Gift Shop and Program Coordinator at the Pajarito Environmental Education Center, or PEEC, in Los Alamos, New Mexico. I will be the moderator for tonight's talk. I want to acknowledge our wonderful members and donors for your generous support. For details about other PEEC programs, visit peaknature.org. I will now pass it over to Tony to start the Mountaineers meeting.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Tony Taylor. I'm the Vice President of the Mountaineers, and welcome to our September meeting. We actually have a lot to show you. So this is our agenda. We just had our 70th anniversary celebration. I'll talk a little bit about that. It was a real success. There are a lot of trip reports, some of which were part of the 70th anniversary celebration. Talk about those in the upcoming trips. Then Zach Baker, our past president, will talk about the upcoming Los Alamos Mountaineers Board election. And then we have our main presentation, which Zach will introduce Beth Cortright and James Hunter. They'll talk about their fabulous trip in Morocco. Okay, so we had our 70th anniversary celebration, September 17th and 18th. This was at Urban Park. And there were actually a lot of activities surrounding it as well. So this is some of the pictures of the great food, the great folks, all of the great fun. We have David Brown, our one of our older members, in the upper left-hand corner. There were actually a lot of activities associated with it. Those are listed here. I'm not going to read through them, but you'll actually see pictures of a lot of them as I go through the trip reports. This is now the trip report section. I'll first talk about the Mountaineer sponsored trip reports. So first of all, September 3rd, we had a Las Conchas hike that Clarissa Jablinski led. 4 people went on it. It was actually, looks like a lot of fun. Looks like happy folks, more than happy folks in some cases. There was also another trip led by Clarissa, which was the White Rock Canyon Rim Trail. And they saw a very small snake, which is in the bottom left-hand corner. If anyone knows what it is, could you please let Clarissa know, because she'd like to know. So we did participate in the Los Alamos Homecoming Parade. And so this is a picture of 5 of us went out there and marched in the parade. A lot of fun. We were all tried to dress up in different mountaineering outfits that we use. This is part of the Los Alamos Mountaineers celebration. We had a gear drive that was actually sponsored by Jean Dewart, who did a lot of work. She actually made 2 trips down to homeless shelters in Santa Fe to bring all of the gear there. So thanks a lot to Jean, and also thanks to the folks who donated. There were a number of other activities, one of which is shown here, which is a backcountry GPS activity that was led by John Berg. There was an avalanche transducer activity that was led by Michael Altair, and there was also a backpacking packing activity. Another trip was a beginning mountain bike ride clinic that was led by Mary. And this was actually, there was a clinic that kind of taught people what they needed to do, what's the right of way, things like that. And then we rode out to the end of Quaji Mesa. There was a higher level bike trip, a 20-mile loop that was in the Bahia Caldera. That was actually led by Sylvie Adam, and you can see the folks there. That was for people that were better at mountain biking than some of the other folks. They saw a lot of elk on the trail. There was another 70th anniversary hike that was led by Olivia. This was actually an off-trail hike to Cerro Rubio and Shaw Mountain. A lot of down trees, talus slopes, route finding was important there, and very steep climbs. A final, I think, maybe one more. Anniversary trip was a loop that went from Los Alamos Canyon to the Knapp Trail and then to the Quesamon Trail. And you can see the folks as part of that trip here. So now we're on to some of our more personal trips. The first one was a 80-mile Wind River Range traverse that was done in late August, actually from Green Lakes to the Big Sandy. This was done by Tanya Pietrus and David D'Antonio. So hopefully we could hear a more detailed version of this trip in one of our upcoming meetings. Again, in the end of August, myself and Stuart Tregman and Cam, who was our guide, we climbed Wham Ridge on Vestal Peak. Bill Podorski has been doing a lot of activities. First, he had a trip with his wife Melissa to Alaska in August. They did some hiking. So you can see the Matanuska Glacier, which is 2 miles out of Anchorage. They did a walking tour there. And then Bill, who is an avid fisherman, you can see he caught a 38-inch northern pike in a backcountry camp in Alaska. He is now in Europe and did some hiking around Zermatt. So you can see him in the lower left-hand corner, hiking in Zermatt, and also above Zermatt with the Matterhorn in the background. So that does it for our trip reports. These are our upcoming trips. As you can see, the first 3 are full, but if you are interested in them, contact the leader, who I think is Bill Podorski, to get on a waiting list. The last one, which is hiking and fishing in the Upper Conejos Valley, that's next summer in July. That was just posted, so there may be opportunities to join that trip. And we're always looking for trip leaders. Anyone can lead a trip, and if you need some help, Bill or other mountaineers can help you learn how to lead a trip. So now I'm going to pass this to Zach, who's going to talk about the upcoming Los Alamos Mountaineers board election.
Hello. So as Tony said, we're always looking for trip leaders, but as it turns out, we're also often looking for board members. So board members organize these talks and these trips and all of the activities of the Mountaineers. And we are looking for a slate for next year. We have a nominating committee, which is me, Carrie and Joan, and mostly we look for new people. So generally we hang out at the grocery store, buy the bananas and see people, and then don't let them leave until they agree to be on the board. But you can make this simpler for us by volunteering. So if you want to meet some new people and get involved in the club, in the Mountaineers a little more, definitely let me know. If you think, oh, the people I know aren't the people that are in the Mountaineers, that's even better, right? Because we're always interested in more diverse trips, more diverse events, and more diverse representation within the board. So if you have any ideas, or if you want to nominate somebody else, send me a note at zachbaker@gmail.com. That's that. And back to Ashley.
All right, just a few logistics for this presentation before we get started. Our presenters will be taking questions via Zoom chat and our in-person audience. For those of you at home, find the chat feature in your Zoom app menu bar. Type your question to the PEEC moderator, Ashley in parentheses, in the chat window anytime during the talk, and I'll read them during the Q&A at the end. Please remember that not everyone in the room here with us has a microphone, so there may be a delay when we're listening to questions from the live audience. Don't worry, we'll be back in a second and repeat the question for everyone to hear. After this talk, you will receive a short evaluation. Please take a moment to fill that evaluation out. Your input helps us improve programs in the future. In particular, if you have questions that we are unable to get to this evening, please let us know. Without further ado, I will hand this back to Zach to introduce our speakers, and I will be monitoring the chat for comments during the program. Thank you.
And back to Zach. So I am not the program coordinator. Rod McCready is, but he was unable to be here, so I am standing in. Today, we are very excited to have Beth and James talking about their adventures in Morocco. Beth and James are avid cavers and have spent weeks underground mapping and exploring unknown caving systems, which is pretty cool. James works at the lab. If you want to know anything about industrial X-ray, James is your guy. Beth works here. You may have heard her voice before, particularly throughout the entire pandemic, keeping us going on the Zoom while we were all in pandemic. We have been doing these lectures for 70 years, and I'm afraid that without Beth, the club probably would have died during the pandemic. So we are very appreciative of Beth's work there. So without further ado, Beth and James.
Okay, can everyone hear me? We're good on sound? Excellent. So I'm going to talk first. I'm James Hunter, and then Beth's going to take over, I think, just a little bit over halfway. And this is about our trip to Morocco. So I'm going to go quick on some of the slides, but the first question I know everyone asks is, why'd you go to Morocco? And it was honestly just kind of fortuitous and came together. We were looking for a first international trip as COVID was winding down about last February. And a couple friends of ours who we do extensive caving with, Jason and Tamara, were also looking at a trip, and we started talking about it. And they said, hey, Morocco looks like it's going to open up and Air France has a sale. Let's do it. So we bought tickets for like $800 a ticket in February, and it was a full refund if it's canceled, et cetera, because they wanted people to travel. And they had this idea, let's climb the tallest mountain in Morocco as like our motivation, and we'll also visit the longest cave in Morocco. And then I had never been to an Arabic country. Beth had only been the one before, and unfortunately the Arabic world's closing to Americans pretty fast. Egypt is no longer safe. Turkey's getting less safe. A lot of the countries you could easily visit are shutting down. And it turns out the king of Morocco, it's still a full monarchy, likes the United States very well right now. Americans are very welcome. So it seemed like a good opportunity to take. And I'm going to jump into the trip, but that's the question everyone asks is, why Morocco? And did you want to add anything on that, Beth? Okay, so we'll get to that photo in a bit. We started in New Mexico, and of course it's international travel. So we flew to Los Angeles, spent a while there. Then we had to fly all the way to Paris. And I don't know why the aerial goes to Spain, but we actually, I won't point fingers there. We actually connected through Paris, and then we flew into Morocco. And in case you're not aware of it, Morocco is a former French colony. So the second language there is French, and a great deal of, sort of the culture and how do I call it, structure is influenced by the French. So that's the first part of the travel. And then I guess I should go back. You can see Morocco. It's fundamentally, on sort of that corner of north corner of Africa. It's really dominated by three zones. You have a coastal zone that's running along the Atlantic and a little bit into the Mediterranean. You've got a mountainous zone that follows that coast called the Atlas Mountains, and that's obviously where we're headed caving. And then behind the Atlas Mountains are the Sahara Desert, and that's kind of that southern border of Morocco. So just to give you a feel for kind of the geography there. And so the trip we did, we started in Marrakesh, which you can see there in the middle, labeled as number 1. And we'll have some photos there. It's a very old city. It's got a beautiful old town. So that's kind of the cultural experience. Then Imlil is the start of the approach to the tallest mountain in Morocco, called Toubkal. So we drove down to Imlil. We spent a few days doing the mountain. Then we went over to Ouarzazate and we visited Ait Benedou, is this famous, what we would call an adobe city or adobe fortress. And from there, we went over to Agadir, spent 2 days caving, and then we did a long drive back to Casablanca and flew out there. So we'll reference kind of these key places. And this is by no means all Morocco. There were several things we looked at doing, we just we couldn't get to. So flying into LA, I think people take for granted the fact that in, was it 24 hours, just the terrain we cover in an airplane. So I always try to take a few pictures out the window as we go. In this case, it was foggy as we landed in LA coming in off the Pacific. Flying into Paris, I'll have a few photos of that on the way back. But this is, they were actually in the middle of a heat wave, kind of like we were. So I guess we didn't actually say this. This was the last 2 weeks of May. So in addition to worrying about COVID and whether we're going to be able to go, we're also worrying about whether White Rock was going to be evacuated when we got back because of the fire. So there was a little stress deciding to go or not. Europe was also quite dry. So this is the view of the French countryside flying in when they're pretty dry. And this is a sculpture in the Paris airport. We spent probably too much time hanging out by. It's this giant, it turns out it's plastic, but this giant sleeping cat sculpture, which always seems appropriate when you're trying to stay awake on an international trip. So that's Paris. And then we landed in Marrakesh, and Jason and Tamara had gotten there the day before, and they had selected what's called a riad. So it's kind of what we'd call a bed and breakfast, honestly, but it's a much older historic hotel style in Arabic countries that was originally built for defense. So it's like a large courtyard. You might have the entire family live there. It's always built around a water feature. And this, they've kept a number of these that you can stay at, and they always provide food, but they're an interesting structure because originally they were built for defense. It's intended to be able to defend sort of your family and your guests from an attack. And so this is the, they call it a road, but the pathway to get to the Riad in Old City Marrakesh. And then on the right there is the somewhat armored front door of the Riad. And of course, at this point, we're wildly jet lagged. So, you're coming in here from taking a taxi. The taxi can't drop you off. It's all walking or carts only or motorcycles because the old city's too tight. So this is what we show up to at the outside. And then on the left there is our room in the Riad. Is just a beautiful old room. And this is all either brick or adobe construction that I think they said what the age was. I mean, this is in the order of, hundreds to 800 years old. And then, like I mentioned, there's always a water feature. So this is this beautiful pool that's kind of the central courtyard in the Riad that it's built around. And so part of this, even though we're going to climb a mountain, appreciating the culture is, at least for me, in some ways, a more memorable part of the trip. So that's the Riad in Marrakesh. And then it was, I believe, 3 stories tall. So it's a 3-story courtyard wall. You've got vines and trees growing out of that central wet area. And then you can look down into it, and you can easily see how these were originally defensive. They're just interesting structures that we don't quite have an analogy to even in the Southwest. And these were, these are all over. These are sort of the original hotel in Morocco.
I just say defensive and also keeping it cool in the desert.
Right, exactly. I mean, we didn't really dwell on this, but Morocco's hotter than New Mexico, right? And it's equally dry, if not drier. So the temperature in this, I mean, this is historic air conditioning. This is how you kept your house cool hundreds of years before air conditioning existed. And these were, you walk into it and it's amazing. It's just it's a totally different experience temperature wise than being outside. And I think we have 1 or 2 pictures of shopping, but we actually did spend quite a while. They have just these enormous markets that are, a mixture of leathercraft, tile, rock, things coming out of the Sahara. So you can really spend a great deal of time in, I don't know how big that was. I mean, it must be hundreds of acres of shops that it's stuff we don't typically see in the United States. The one challenge for us here was that Morocco had just opened from COVID. And this is a culture that primarily a huge chunk of their income, I don't remember the percentage, but the income of the country is tourism. And that had been choked off for 3 years from COVID. And these people were desperate to sell. And it was actually like you couldn't look at something without having people trying to make a deal, sell you something. And so it was actually hard to even like stop to try to shop a little bit because they were just, and you certainly felt safe because there is like, oh my God, these are the people that left for 3 years and we don't want to scare them away again. And so it was a little bit sad seeing just, COVID destroyed their economy. They were in rough shape. Another big part of Moroccan culture is that they're very food and hospitality oriented. And so throughout this, we have just kind of photos of the meals we were served. It's interesting. You have to get out of the mindset of like, I'm going to come into the hotel, check in, get to my room and go do something. You show up at the Riad, they serve tea, you have cookies, you talk about where you're from, the history of the building, and maybe 40 minutes later, they'll give you your room key and you can get in. And so it is a very different pace than what a lot of, I think, American travelers are used to. And this was our breakfast on the top story of that Riad. And it was, the food was never bad. It was always very good. just another picture of the food on the left there. I mean, it's, it's very fruit oriented. You have a lot of fresh food. Fortunately, they do drink coffee, which helped a lot. And then Morocco is known for tile work. And so that's just one example of a tile fountain in the Marrakesh area. Another one, this is a historic restored garden that was part of the Moroccan, I guess, royalty structure hundreds of years before, and then was abandoned and restored. And so this is all gravity driven water flow stuff. And then it's tile that they uncovered and restored. So just beautiful stuff. We did spend one extra night there, and this is just kind of more of the city life in Morocco. You can see on the rooftop, and we're obviously shorts and t-shirt. That's the kind of temperature we're in there. And it was definitely amazing. I don't think we ever felt unsafe certainly in Marrakesh is a neat area. And you can tell Beth and I are still a little jet lagged, and that's Jason and Tamara on the left. So now we're headed off. I always try to just include a little bit of a photo of what driving looks like. Jason did most of it. We rented a big Toyota Land Cruiser. I drove for a day because he was sick. Really wasn't bad. Pretty standard stuff if you're used to driving in a foreign country. You can see it's not like heavy vegetation. That's what most of Morocco looks like. It's a very dry, pretty honestly overgrazed country is how I would describe it, but gives you a little bit of a feel for it. And it's interesting to realize, their culture, a large part of the Berber culture there is based on goats. Their wealth is their goats. And so there were goats everywhere. And the problem is there's really no fences. So this entire country has been grazed to the ground. This is a country that actually at one point launched an empire that invaded Spain and large parts of Europe. They built enormous fleets, and they basically don't have trees left. And it's really an interesting thing to observe. This goats will eat anything. And boy, they have destroyed the countryside there. And we saw that everywhere we went, that it's a little sobering to see what can happen and how much it impacts sort of the long-term wealth of a society. So that's the goat picture. This is now just headed up into the mountains. So we're starting to gain elevation, headed up towards Imlil. And they were taking a picture of this extremely sketchy cable bridge across the river. So, now this is the Imlil Riad Alice, which is the hotel or Riad that we stayed in at the town that's the launch to climbing the mountain. And they also helped organize our guide. So we're actually walking on the approach to the hotel. We had to park quite a ways up this dirt road, and then the hotel's off to the left. So it was an interesting approach. You weren't entirely sure if you were just out in the middle of nowhere or if there was actually a hotel here. But beautiful building. That's the inside of it. We spent a couple nights there, and same thing, it took us like an hour to get past the tea stage to actually get our room. Yeah, and just gorgeous woodwork. We got, the entire history of this room we were staying in, who had made the rugs. They're very friendly people, but you have to just slow down to that pace. That's what you're going to be doing. So that's that Riad. And then they like rooftop balconies. So this is the balcony we always had the meals on at that Riad. And you can see Toubkal, the highest mountain in the very back there, or at least I can't tell exactly how well it shows up on the screen. So that's where we're headed. And you can see this area's actually got a lot of trees. Turns out these are all cultivated. These are all a combination of cherry and walnut trees through this entire valley. And so you could actually just stop and pick cherries from like the approach path to our hotel. But those were basically the only trees. The cultivated stuff above that, there wasn't much. So that's the start. And this is the road we drove to get there. So they had these beautiful giant old, I believe these ones were walnuts. So we were just walking around. We had to get some food for the trip, and you'll see there's food on the way, but we were stocking up a little bit. Just another picture of a meal, and then looking at the mountains right behind Beth there. So there's kind of a common theme here of they really love their food. I mean, that's like a large part of any trip to Morocco, I think. So that's the meal. There were really cute cats. You put the cat photo in? So
yeah, we had cats usually under each table, under each meal, and Tamara especially liked giving them little treats, and the owners didn't seem to mind at all. I was thinking, oh, they're gonna tell us, please don't feed the cats, but no, they were fine and not too pushy and absolutely adorable.
That's the Riad cat. This is stocking up on food, so they have a great deal because they have nut trees in the country. You can get fresh nuts, fresh nut butter. So we ended up with an awful lot of sort of local produce. We actually had a bag of cherries at the start, and then of course I'm being sort of a rock climber most of the time. They had this nice boulder like right on the main road in town, and so I couldn't resist trying to boulder around on it. And Jason got a photo of me doing that. Yeah, so that's getting ready. And then Jason, he's really the natural leader when we did this. He's the one that had the vision. He came up with the itinerary, and he bought this Moroccan hat as soon as he got into Morocco, and he's wearing his shorts and his t-shirt. And this group of kids was going to school, going the other way on the road. And this like looks like the cool kid in the group, right? He stops and he looks at Jason and he looks him up and down. And he goes, "Nice." And so they had to get a photo with him. But it just the kid could barely even speak English, and he had no idea who we were, but he just loved the look. So that was that photo. And then this is our last dinner before we head up. And I think in addition to the gorgeous food, Beth included this because that's a fruit salad in the middle, right? So it's got slices of orange, and are the red things tomatoes? I don't remember what those are. And it's covered in ketchup. They just took like a bottle of ketchup and put it over it. So we ate some of it, but it was like, what? Ketchup on fruit salad? You can't do that. So it's good food, but there was some sort of different stuff. That was that. And then this is the group actually starting to think about the mountain. And it's really, it's not too bad, but we're standing at about 6,000 feet. And this thing is what, 13,671, something like that. So we've got, about a 7,000 foot climb ahead of us. And the plan is to go up to a hut. You're required to stay there. So there was unfortunately a bad incident where two Europeans were kidnapped and murdered on this hike about 5 years ago. And so since then, the government has clamped down a lot. You have to have a guide. They have passport checkpoints so they know where you are and where to go looking if there's a problem. That being said, that's the one incident that's happened in years there. So I wouldn't say we felt unsafe, but we had a guide. We were staying at this hut partway up. And then our plan was to summit and come back down in a day. So yeah, that's that. And then we honestly didn't need it, but you need to bring your own sleeping bag and stuff for the hut. So we paid for a burro to take our gear up. And part of this is that, I think anyone that's done international third world travel understands this. You're supporting the local economy. And so doing things like paying for the guide, paying for the mule, it's a trivial amount of money to us, and it helps their economy a lot. So this was loading the mule up, and then we just took day packs up. This is the national park. So Toubkal is in a national park, and this is the boundary. It's harder to tell though, it's grazed everywhere. There's people that live everywhere. So it's not quite what we think of as a national park, but it is supposed to be a protected area. And this is about what the hike looked like for the first 10 miles, maybe kind of hot, dry, gradually going up mountains. I mean, it'd be like you plunked a 13er in the middle of New Mexico, maybe southern New Mexico, and you're hiking up it. It's not super forested or cold or anything, but you can see there's some snow up there. More goats. And the reason I included this photo, I don't think this one actually that you can see it, but to give you an idea of how bad it is, the juniper tree, and they have one that's very similar to us, is endangered. And it's endangered because goats eat it. And so we would see these occasional junipers, and there'd be a goat up the tree eating the branches. And so that's how their trees get wiped out. So it was amazing to see how much damage had been done there. Just another view of looking up on the, it's a major trail. There's a good stream, but it was pretty hot and dry. It was really more like long sleeves and hat and sun protection than anything else. And coming from Los Alamos, the altitude wasn't bad for us. Continuing to look up, now we're actually getting to where, we can see the snow, and the mountain's up to the left, and then the refuge or the hut is up to the right. So we're going to go up to the right, then we go up a ridge to the summit, and then we took a different route down that dropped us out a little bit above this. So, really more what I'd call a hike than a mountain climb, but that's the trail. Continuing upwards, same feel, and they run pack animals up and down this, so it's not too rough. This is a sort of what do we want to call it? It's a holy shrine down to the right that they explained it to us, and it basically seemed like crazy people came there to try to get better, was sort of the description we got. And tourists were not allowed in most of that area, but they had restaurants and such set up on the trail there. So we stopped and ate lunch, I think both times. No, once just above this going up and once on the way down. And on the way up, this was the last. So, you don't carry that much food because they've brought up full meals and they have a hut there and they cook. So this was where we ate lunch on the way up. So it's more like almost a European experience than a US mountain. And then the summit's up to the left again. So that's that. And of course they got cool drinks for sale. So it's kind of a catered experience, honestly. But you also got to remember, as Jason found out the hard way, that water's not treated. And so the caution about getting a stomach bug from untreated water certainly held true for Jason. He was sick for a couple of days. And then this is the so-called refuge. So it's more like a 50-room hotel. We got private rooms. You could also stay in a bunkhouse. They had meals. So pretty nice setup. It's actually two refuges. The upper one was built by the French National Mountaineering Club, and the French still own it. And then the lower one was built by the Moroccans years later. So that's where we spent the night. And that's the description. You're allowed to set up a tent, but you have to pay and camp inside this courtyard. And that's kind of the protected area. So that was part of their response to the earlier issue I mentioned. And you can see you do get quite a list of different languages available, but French is sort of the one that's always there. And then just a view of that's the refuge looking from the side. And then let me try to use the mouse here. So our route is going to go, it comes out from behind this building here, and you can actually see the sort of path, goes up there, zigzags a little bit. There's a trail here. There's one icy section right there. And this really wasn't bad by Colorado standards. And then we zigzag up and, I lost my mouse. We go up through this pass or col and then up a summit ridge. And then on our way down, we came down off to the left of this. So that's the basic route up the mountain. And then that's just a quick view of having snacks and dinner in the refuge. And once again, we're bouldering on anything available. And Beth, do you want to talk about the dog or?
I just wanted to say that you'll see this little one again. This was just a puppy that we met at the refuge and was absolutely adorable. And we didn't really see any other dogs up there. There were the donkeys and some goats and sheep, but just this one dog, and it was kind of curious. But so remember that face, and we'll come back.
And then here's climbing up on top of another boulder there. It looks really cool, but the trash dump for the refuge is actually right behind that boulder. So it's a lot more disgusting than it looks in the picture. It is. I mean, it's not completely a first world country, that's for sure. And then we got up, really early, typical mountaineering start. It was solidly dark, and then it got light as we were coming up kind of that final col. And so this is the path, and we must have passed 50 people. I mean, it's a pretty big operation. So Tamara and Jason are coming from San Diego. They were struggling a little with altitude, but for Beth and I, it wasn't bad. I mean, it's just a typical hike up and scree. And this was, I think, the steepest, largest snowfield we crossed. There is some skiing here in the winter. This can be done as a winter ski trip, at least from the refuge up. And that's our guide on the left. And I don't remember his name. He was a great guy. And yeah, I think that's about all I'd say for that. It's really just, it's fun. It's a neat thing to do. It's not what I'd call a challenging mountain. And just looking back down the route, so the refuge is this is, as the sun's coming up, when you do mountaineering, you're always like that sunrise when it gets warm and you're most of the way up is really good feeling. So the refuge is down in the valley there. And this is looking at groups coming up behind us, and just another pretty view of that. And looking down that snowfield we were looking up before, and it's a heavily beaten in path. So I never felt like I even needed trekking poles or anything like that. So then here's a couple panoramic views on the summit. We'll have that main summit photo as well, but you're in a neat location. If it wasn't so smoggy, you could see Marrakesh and you could probably actually see the Atlantic. And then the photo on the top is looking basically south. So that haze in the distance is really the partly haze and partly the sand of the Sahara Desert. So you're sort of standing on this major climate divide, and it was very windy up there. So it was, hang out for a little bit and get going. And this was us on the lee side hanging out, and the guy brought a pot tea, so we're having our tea there. And that's once again the Sahara down to the south. And actually a little bit later in the talk, we'll have the Adobe Fortress, i.e. Benadoo, and that's loosely speaking down in the left of that photo off in the distance. And that's the summit photo. So about 13.7. You can see it was pretty cold. It was pretty windy, but fun hike. And Jason felt like he had to blend in, so he bought himself a scarf, and the guy showed him how to tie it. He was really happy with that. And you want to go back and talk about that, Beth?
Okay, so this was the Summit puppy. Apparently, we found out later that this dog, actually, when we got up to the top, we found out that this dog had summited this mountain every day for the past 2 weeks. And it goes back down to the refuge, about 3,000 feet down, and back up to the top every single day. And
yeah, no one owns it. It's just, it decided to live at the refuge, and it's going up and down the mountain every day.
yeah, I'm sure it gets a couple snacks and finds somewhere to eat, but I loved it for that. I don't know.
So that's that. And then this is headed down. I told you we took a slightly different route. So sort of dead center in the photo towards the bottom, you can see a trail headed off. That's the way we went down that, and then took a left down just another scree-filled gully. And in basically dead center in this, you can see kind of a green patch. That's Leal, where we started, in those cherry trees. And so you can see it's kind of it's a pretty barren area, and then this little oasis in the middle. And then Tamara has knee trouble, so they asked and decided on the way down she was going to ride the mule for part of the trip. So she rode the mule down from once we hit the main trail the rest of the way down. And that's the same location where we ate on the way up. And then I unfortunately left my good hat in the refuge when we got up at 4 a.m. and left. So I bought this really nice straw hat for $10 on the way down. And I still have the hat. I managed to get it all the way back from Morocco. And it's actually one of the best straw hats I've ever gotten. It's holding up well. So I was happy with that. And then this is, that's actually a repeat photo, but this is supposed to be dinner after the mountain, I believe. And I'm going to turn it over to Beth for the remainder of the trip.
All right. And I'll just say that, yeah, we did have a great dinner when we got down off the mountain. They always wanted you to say the exact time that you wanted to eat a meal, if you wanted to have it in advance, because if you walked into a place and asked, say the Riad, we went in and asked one night, it was about that time, and we said, how about dinner? And they said, oh, okay, in 2 hours. And it was already 6 or 7 at night. You're like, huh, that's all right. We'll find some other route. But yes, these are all the tagines down at the bottom left-hand corner. They're a clay pot type of thing where they put them over a propane burner and put all the seasonings and water, and you can have later you'll see a couscous based one. These were potato and chicken based, and it just steams the heck out of it. But it takes a long time, and they serve those with the big round breads there. All right, so then after the big mountain experience, and one more night in Imleal, we got back on the road, and this was that kind of bottom right hand corner of the sort of loop that we did driving. So we're heading down towards the Sahara, towards Ouarzazate, and we passed a couple trucks like this, or got stuck behind them. These are double-decker cow trucks, kind of homemade, and they all looked kind of different, but you didn't want to get quite too close to that one, but there's one like laying down on the top of the truck. And then I think James took this picture like out the window at one point. You can see kind of the adobe structure. We're getting closer, we're getting further away from the mountains and closer to the desert. And just looking at that kind of architecture out the window. At our Riad in Ouarzazate, it's called Riad Che. And again, a very interesting route to find it. They sent very good directions. Like you'll see this random sign and this random sign, and you keep going and turn right at this random sign. But yeah, we made it there just fine again, and we had a beautiful sunset looking out over the palm trees and kind of an oasis. This was, I think, on a river. This city. And yeah, beautiful palm trees, and this place actually had a big garden out back. I think on the bottom right, that's like more like an arroyo. There's a big garden around it. And of course, we should call this presentation the Cats of Morocco. There were 2 kittens playing in the courtyard with the water feature, and in the center of the Riad, like same situation, same makeup as the one in the middle of the city, but just adorable. And I had some time with them. And here's one of our tagines arriving. Again, we had to wait. Like thankfully, we got to this Riad pretty early, and then ordered a dinner that would be ready a couple hours later. And you can see the tagine there. He's bringing to the table that had been, cooking for a long time, and they set it all up. They're very particular about, everybody's place has to be place setting has to be very particular, very all set before you get there. Another view out this is probably from the top of that Riad, and just kind of showing that, that, I don't know, stereotypical an oasis in the desert. And this Ouarzazate was about the closest we got to the edge of the northern Sahara Desert. More food. This was a wonderful sort of side dish arrangement, almost like an appetizer. Yeah, a wonderful variety. Lots of olives that we saw, peppers in there, sort of a fried ball thing, and some cabbage. Really, this was probably the more spiced sampling that we got. Everything else was I don't know, not as different in the spices, I'd say. Okay, so just giving a little bit of a recap. The numbers are actually the number of nights that we spent at each place. So we were 3 nights in Imlil because one of them was up at the refuge, and then 1 night out at Ouarzazate. And then on our way out of Ouarzazate the next day, we stopped at this Ait Benadou. It's this is what James had mentioned before. The armored fortress that made out of adobe was actually used in a lot of movies as a movie set. And there's a tower up at the top, so you can walk through this whole big city. Not really big city, small city, and there's shops as you go, and then you make your way to the top, and you get a great view around. It's on sort of a mesa up there. So we walked across this giant, I guess, a floodplain, sort of a riverbed that maybe floods during their wet season or runs during their wet season, and made our way into the city. It was I think the most popular movie that was filmed here was Gladiator. And they had pictures everywhere because I guess the main actor had come back and done like I don't know, he was a lot older, but he did his famous pose in the city there. And the views as you were going up were great. We parked somewhere over across here. There was a kind of a main street of shops over there. And we made our way to the top, and you got to this big tower. It's a neat spot up there. And I guess that was the last of Ait Benadou. All right, from there, we made our way across towards the coast, and we went to Agadir. And this is kind of it's a fancier city on the, with the big beaches and kind of almost like a strip, almost like you would see in more larger cities that, LA or San Diego built on the ocean. And we based out of Agadir to go to the 3 different caves that we went to. And what Jason started off doing is first he was interested in going to this Win Timdouin cave. It's one of the longest in Africa, and it's definitely the largest in the region. And it's a huge reserve of groundwater that you don't really see come to surface anywhere else in the Atlas Mountains. And so he first started looking at this cave, and he reached out to a caver who was, I think he got contact information through other cavers that he knew. And unfortunately that person he was the one to go with. He was the only one that could get a group into this cave and get all the permitting and everything, but he spoke 0 English. And it was really hard to communicate. They were both communicating, I think, with Google Translate, and is doing it the best that they could. But they ended up going to almost like a guiding service for outdoor activities. And through that, a couple of guys there were able to translate better and set up the entire trip for us. So the first cave we went to, Win Timdween, and we went all the way up this road, and that's somebody just said in the audience, it looks like New Mexico. It sure does. And I'm going to go into that even more. But we drove with them. We followed them in our car up to the mountains, and pulled off on one little pull off here, and saw the rest of our route, which is this not great tiny little road that there was no way you could have anybody on it go in either direction on. So that goes all the way up to the entrance, which is right up in this area here in a kind of the top center. And then so we made it up to the entrance, and we had arranged with them to bring us some wetsuits for those that wanted to wear them. And they got our height and general size, but we're still a little worried that if we were going to get wetsuits that fit. But I was lucky enough. They brought one that fit me, and I think Tamara brought her own. And this is the entrance, and you'll see this black pipe in a couple photos, I think, and it's a gated entrance, and the black pipe is bringing water out. This is usually running a little bit higher, I think, but again, it was really dry at that point, and they were doing some construction outside the entrance to the cave. There's a big pool there that if you Google this Win Timdween, you'll see photos of it's like Instagram famous or something of people in that pool right outside the entrance. So we went in, and I'll show you photos. Also, they said, oh yeah, we'll bring you wetsuits, and we'll bring flotation devices. We'll bring you some life jackets to wear, because it's a swimming cave. And we said, oh great, that'll be really good to have some safety in the unknown swimming cave. So we went in. We had a great trip through this cave. It was a little chilly. Do you remember the temperature? It was probably like upper 50s of maybe low 60s of water temperature. I get cold, so I brought neoprene gloves and neoprene socks and had this thick wetsuit. James, did you have neoprene under? No, so James just brought his own cave suit, and there we are. Oh, there was one spot in the cave that that they really wanted to show us this plaque that was on the wall. And so we gathered all around, and they told us this story that was translated thanks to our guide. But they told us the story about how a group of cavers, I think including our main cave guide, had gone in this cave, and it started to flood. And it flooded so much, it flooded the entrance shut. And they were able to get to a high point in the cave that was right near this plaque. And they waited there for 5 days until the floodwaters subsided and they were able to get out. But there's a plaque commemorating their time spent waiting for the floodwaters to go down. So not to be taken lightly in the cave. And here we actually have also the flotation devices that they gave us. So when we got there, they said, okay, we're actually, when we joined them in Agadir, soon after we started on the roads, they said, oh, we got to stop at this place. We said, okay, yeah, we're going where you go. And they stop, and they take all these inner tubes out of their car and blow them up at the air station. And we're sitting there in our car, and finally it dawns on all of us, okay, that's our flotation device right there. Those are it. I think that's what we're doing. And we did, and we had a great time. It was fine. This guy here is our 18-year-old Moroccan American interpreter, who it turns out is claustrophobic. But he had just started working with this other guy here who owns the outing company, and doing some work for him and doing more outdoorsy stuff. And oh gosh, he was absolutely hilarious. You'll see him. He's in here in red. You'll always see him with his cell phone there because he was constantly taking video for TikTok, I think, or Instagram, constantly. Here, and he would hand it to us. So here, take a video of me coming through this spot in the cave. And oh, here, I'll video you. Like try to make it look really hard. It's like, And part of, another part of him was completely hilarious because he was very eloquent. He was very a wonderful translator, but he would be speaking perfect Berber, a version of Arabic. And then he would turn back to us and he would ask us, or translate a question or something that the cavers were saying. And he would say, well, what does he mean by that? What does that mean in, for the caving world? And we would tell him, and he would go, sick. Oh, that's sick. And you kind of you revert back to like, oh yeah, this is kind of a typical 18-year-old American teen. But yeah, there we all are. So myself and our interpreter, two of the guys, this guy in the orange was our main caver that Jason had started talking to initially and knew no English. So but he was one of the ones stuck in the cave during the flood. I think the guy in the gray is is he the owner? He's the kind of the caretaker of the cave. He makes sure that people are authorized to go through the gate. James, Jason, and Tamara. And here we are doing our doing our trek through the cave. We just spent a couple hours in there. There was some like full-on swimming sections, and yeah, they wanted me to jump in this part and wade out. Actually, this is pretty near. There's some tubes up above this level that are sandy and dry, and so at one point we passed all of our inner tubes up to an upper level, and it was a pretty nice cave. It was very, very nice. And the water was beautiful. But we pushed our inner tubes up there and did kind of a loop of crawling and walking up in the sandy area. And then we popped out this one area and they said, it's down there where you go. And it was about a 10-foot drop off of this bell dome of flowstone and a completely clear drop into very deep water. And they said, okay, grab your inner tube and you kind of slide off. It's like a slide. It's like a kid's slide. And most of us did that. I think Tamara went around the other way with one of the guys. It didn't necessarily want to do that. But yeah, that was kind of their thrill that they wanted to show us. It was really cool that they have a lot of pride in this cave. So again, as soon as we were done, they said, okay, we're taking you to this place to have your next meal. And it was quite the spread. And I don't know how many times I was like, okay, that's gotta be it, right? They're not bringing anything out. And they would bring out another huge tagine full of food. So this was at this man's house nearby that they set up a big meal for us, and again, lots of pride in what they could have. This is the couscous based tagine, lots of veggies. I think there's a big chicken, some chunk of meat in the center there. There's cream and different sorts of like tomato mashes that you can add to it, and then always the tea. And it's I don't think you said it's a mint tea that they serve. It's basically, yeah, caffeinated mint tea. We've learned that kind of the hard way when we drank too much too late in the evening. But okay, so driving around that area up in the mountains, and James, you can add if you want. James took these photos of one of the main trees that you drive past. That's it's an argan tree. So Morocco is the only country that produces argan oil and has the argan tree, and it's a lot like an olive. I guess it's pressed similar to olives to make like olive oil. And there were a lot of shops around that had argan oil for sale, and we went toward one little. It was a women's co-op that was created to give women jobs and teach them how to create this argan oil and make money off of for tourism and selling it around. Okay, so in amongst the argan trees and some junipers and this is probably kind of familiar looking. This is, you know, I swear I could have taken this photo hiking around the Guads in the Guadalupe Mountains in southern New Mexico. The fossils were the same in the rocks. The vegetation looked exactly the same. The scarring from like monsoonal moisture coming through the bottom of the canyon looked the same as walking through parts of New Mexico. It was kind of creepy, actually. It was how similar it was. And then some of the caves were actually kind of similar too. The first cave this was the second day, the first cave that they took us to on the second day, they called Lizard Cave, because there's an endemic, very small little lizard that lives near the entrance to this cave and hangs out in the entrance. We didn't see any. We saw plenty of other types of lizards in the area, but yeah, they took us to this small cave. And it was really neat. It had some big pools in it with, you can see this one with all the calcite rafts. And again, they had lots of pride in the lakes, and they wanted to show us, you know, the highlights of areas in this cave. We spent some time, they sent us through a small hole in the side of one room that led to, they said led to just miles and miles of more cave. And they sent us through that to look at the next room across. But we spent some time talking in there and looking around. And I think this was the second cave we went to that day. So just a little ways, we walked maybe a mile or two up the canyon, and then another maybe quarter mile up the canyon. There's this much larger entrance in the wall, and they said that the two caves aren't connected. Oh, they do connect. Sorry, the two caves do connect, and so that one was Lizard Cave, and this is called Bat Cave. And guess why? There are lots of bats in the back of this cave, but a cool entrance to climb into, and lots of other cave adapted organisms as well. So at the bottom, those are all isopods. We're all over the it's basically a floor made of bat guano, which you see in a lot of caves that have a lot of bats, and a cave adapted millipede, really neat looking little critter there. And as it goes, afterwards, this was actually, our hike was like down into this canyon right over here. So a couple of the men, or I think the guides, paid some other men and one that lives nearby to stay up near our cars and, you know, watch our cars and our stuff, and also to cook our lunch for a couple hours while we were out in the caves. And by the time we came out, there was this huge spread of, I don't know what this was, on a stick, and more kebabs of some sort, olives all over the place, big breads, and you know, nice chairs. And oh, they brought hats. They brought straw hats for everybody just in case we wanted to wear them. And so that was a great experience, caving with that group. Okay, so that was the end of our time in Agadir. And then instead of going along the coast, it was a much more direct route to kind of come inland a little bit towards Marrakesh, and then straight north to Casablanca, where we were flying out. In Casablanca, they have this giant mosque on the coast, and a lot of people spend a lot of time down around this area. So this was just a short walk from our hotel, and we had plans to go to tour this mosque, but those fell through on the day that we flew out due to some technical difficulties getting the COVID testing done to get out of the country. Rick's Place. So there's a question in the audience. Did we go to Rick's Place? I don't think so. It's from the movie Casablanca. No, we heard a lot about the movie Casablanca, and we talked a lot about it, but no, we didn't have a lot of time there. We walked around a little bit. There was a nearby market, and then we did this one day walking down towards the mosque and along the coast. But our day, I think our flight out was maybe like mid-afternoon to go up to Paris, and we blew most of that morning getting these COVID things figured out, because you needed a verified via Zoom negative test to get to board your Air France flight, and there were some technical difficulties that held us up. Tamara made a friend out in front of the mosque. She was very interested in Tamara, and just kept like poking her skin and wanted to know about her glasses, and it was a very cute interaction there. All right, so here we are on our way home. This is the coast of Morocco. Saying goodbye to Northern Africa. And James was excited that we flew so close to the Strait of Gibraltar. And so the top picture is the strait that you can see going into the Mediterranean. And then the bottom photo is what, the city of, yeah, the Rock of Gibraltar. And we actually, so we planned this a little, well, we planned this. We had a 13-hour layover in Paris. So here on the left, you see, we saw the Eiffel Tower flying in, which was really cool to see how absolutely ginormous it is in amongst the city. And then, so we flew into Paris like at 7 p.m. and we had a 9:30 ticket to go up to the top of the Eiffel Tower. So we did that, kind of a city experience that I don't think either of us had ever been to Paris. It was really, really fun to see, and to get to take the taxi there and see a little bit more of the city. We hit it just right. It was, dead of summer, right? So we had a really late sunset, and beautiful sunset from up there. Jason got to use his selfie stick, so he's very, very happy. And then James took more pictures out the window as we went across. What do you think this is?
Yeah, this is northern Canada. I'm just always amazed. I can show you a photo of Morocco, the Strait of Gibraltar, Paris, and then this is somewhere up in northern Canada, flying in and then landing in LA. Just the span of terrain we cross.
So as you do on international travel, they had to cheers with their champagne, and then we made it back. All of our negative COVID tests in hand, and we were able to make it back to just a couple hours layover in LA, and then back to Albuquerque. So that was our trip. We'd both be happy to take any questions.
No, so those were a little unusual. Those are actually just cell phone photos, but cell phones have gotten much better, but that's actually just all off the headlamps that we were using. So we had fairly high power caving headlamps. Normally my answer would be that we use camera flashes, but we didn't want to, so we'll use an off-board camera flash to provide light, but we didn't want to try to travel with that much equipment. So those were all cell phone photos with just the high-end caving headlamps. But they're not really commercial caves. We had actually contacted the local caving community that's doing exploration. And so none of these were set up for commercial tourism. The question was, what resources did Jason use for finding the lodging? And, I can't say we went into it in detail, but he really just read reviews online. They ran across the idea originally of, there was kind of a list of interesting things to do in the world, and climbing the highest mountain in Morocco was on it. And so we had been talking about a couple different countries, and seemed like an appealing idea. And the way the Air France flights were set up was just low risk to cancel and get refunded. But he loves itineraries, and they both love reading review sites and such. So it was all online reviews. And he had the reservations were kind of complicated, because some of them were like booking, and some of them you had to contact the place specifically. And so Beth and Jason spent a couple hours making all the reservations at the same time. But yeah, it was online reviews. It wasn't like any particular special resource. So the question was, where do you get gas when you're driving around? And honestly, it's no different than the United States. There's quite a number of gas stations. Fuel's more expensive, but it felt actually pretty reasonably civilized. We never had an issue with that. And kind of same thing with, you just use ATMs to get cash, and most of the bigger places like a Riad would take a credit card if you needed to. So the question was, did we mostly speak English or French? And I guess the answer is, it was for us primarily English. So Beth speaks some Spanish, and so we would occasionally be able to talk Spanish. And I had French in high school 20 years ago. Tamara and Jason had never had French, and so it was you know, it was either kind of the usual, try to find a few words in sign language or English. And they weren't great at English, but it never felt like it was really holding us back. The only frustrating part was, you know, the cavers are kind of like going to, you know, the mountain club meeting somewhere, you can't understand what they're saying. And so the cavers are kind of like people that we would really inherently get along with, share stories. It'd be really fun. And so having to work through a translator there was frustrating. But otherwise, you know, there was always someone that spoke English.
We have one question from the Zoom crew. Goats, are they used for meat as well? Are there any plans to reforest and keep their goats for livelihood?
So the goats are meat and leather and wool, I guess you would say, for goats. But it's, you know, the herding culture there, the Berbers, that's kind of like their bank account. So if they have 30 goats, that's their family's wealth. So it's a combination of food and then, you know, other agricultural resources. And we really didn't run across anything that was an indication of if they had a broader agricultural plan like reforesting. I mean, it was clearly an issue, but it didn't seem like something they were working on. And they were also, to be fair, that they are also in a bad drought. And so that area should be somewhat greener, and it isn't, because they were in, I mean, it's like year 3 of a drought. So somewhat similar to New Mexico.
We saw one area in Imlil that looked like it was an exclosure, you know, a typical square rectangle of tall fencing that was just to keep animals out but it was on, you know, one hillside, but that might have been an example.
Yeah, we should have pointed that out. It was very striking that this one area that it looked honestly like a piece of private property, or like it was fenced off because it was around it looked like a telecommunication tower, just much more heavily vegetated. You know, it looked like it was in kind of what I'd expect in Mexico, in pretty reasonable shape. And then everything around it was denuded. So.
All right, those are all the questions that came in from viewers. Thank you, James and Beth, for sharing your trip with us tonight. Everyone, please remember to look out for the quick survey coming to your email. If you're interested in attending more PEEC programs, we have some great ones coming up. This Friday night, join us here in the planetarium for our astronomy program, Apollo to Artemis. We will also be at Los Luceros on Sunday for the New Mexico Outdoor Pass, Plants and Sky. We hope to see you there. Again, thank you for everyone for joining us this evening, and have a good night.